Good morning, Father Leonid.
Good morning.
Thank you very much for agreeing to this interview commemorating the 100th anniversary of Holy Virgin Mary Cathedral and our attempt to dig into the past, into the people who made Holy Virgin Mary Cathedral, who are responsible for the community around it. So very much appreciate your taking the time. We'd like to begin the questions with sort of your childhood memories of Los Angeles and the parish. I understand that you were not born in Los Angeles, you were born in Poland and came to Los Angeles at an early age, but your earliest memories of life in Los Angeles, in the community and in the parish, what most sort of springs to mind?
I was 8 years old when my family immigrated from Germany as displaced persons. We immigrated to the U.S. and were brought across the Atlantic by a ship that had been a troop ship during the war. I have a few memories of that. But when we arrived in Los Angeles by train, from New Orleans, that's where the ship came to land. I do remember being met by some people from the parish at the train station because there was a group to aid arriving refugees and displaced persons. To the best of my knowledge, I would not have known that at that time, but to the best of my subsequent knowledge, that effort was begun, was created by Archbishop John Kishkovsky when, for a relatively short time, he was priest in Los Angeles. And he gathered some supportive people to aid in the process of welcoming arriving refugees and displaced persons. So we were even lodged in a house that was either bought or rented by this group. I think it was bought. A very modest house in which we were given lodging until we found our own way. That finding our own way happened rather efficiently and quickly, and my family rented on our own, rented a house. Probably we were given some kind of aid to accomplish that, but we lived at that period essentially next to the cathedral, Holy Virgin Mary Cathedral. That house no longer exists. That land became eventually a parking lot of the parish. But we lived in that house, I would say, for about 10 years. So essentially, we were living on the same block as Holy Virgin Mary Cathedral, which meant that I made my way quickly to the church to be an altar server, прислужник. And I remember that I brought the average age of прислужники down radically as an 8-year-old, because the most vivid memory is of a very elderly gentleman. Maybe he wasn't that elderly, but I think he was, who was kind of the старший прислужник, the senior altar server. Also the priest of Holy Virgin Mary Cathedral at that time was Father Alexander Kukulevsky, with whom I became close. He was a very elderly man, and I was a very young kid, but I was fond of him. He was an interesting person, an interesting priest. Eventually, I learned from some forays into studying history of the Metropolia of the Orthodox Church in America, that Father Kukulevsky was a very prominent figure in our church. He came as a young man and missionary to the United States. He was a friend of Metropolitan Leonti before Metropolitan Leonti was a monk or a bishop. They were both Father Leonid Turkevich, subsequently Metropolitan Leonti, and Father Alexander were delegates to the All-Russian Church Council of 1917-1918. But in various descriptions and archives, I learned that after Father Kukulevsky's death, I learned that he was a key figure in some of the debates about the future of the Orthodox Church in North America when he was a younger and very active man. He served in several parishes on the East Coast. Among them, for a short time, was St. Nicholas Church in Whitestone. Among them, for several years, was Holy Trinity Church in Brooklyn. Eventually, he ended up as a priest on the West Coast. A vivid memory for me was the occasion when Metropolitan Leonti came to his funeral, flew from New York to Los Angeles to be at the funeral of his old friend. And I was altar server, subdeacon by then, to Metropolitan Leonti, who was in the church for the funeral services. Metropolitan Leonti had in a way, a wicked sense of humor. He, for example, was being brought into the sanctuary, into the altar, by Father Ilari, who was an assistant priest in Los Angeles. And as Father Ilari was leading him into the sanctuary to venerate the altar table, helping him up the steps and making sure that he was retaining his balance, but Metropolitan Leonti pointed to the mitra, the mitre on the altar table, and at that time in the Metropolia, only the Metropolitan's mitre had a cross on top. And the mitre on the altar table did not have a cross on top because Irinei, Archbishop Irinei, who had accompanied Metropolitan Leonti, was not a metropolitan. And so Metropolitan Leonti very quietly says to Father Ilari, you see that mitre, it has no cross on top, but it wants to have a cross. So that was a clear sign of a good sense of humor. Father Kukulevsky, at one point when we were already there in Los Angeles, was ill and needed a rather serious surgery, and Archbishop John Shahovskoy thought that probably at his age he would not be able to return to be nastoyatel, rector of the Holy Virgin Mary Church. The operation did occur. Father Kukulevsky had a time of recuperating, but during the months that this was going on, the priest brought over from Seacliff, New York, where I now am rector, was substituting for Father Kukulevsky, and Archbishop John, I am pretty sure, was hoping that he would become the pastor at Holy Virgin Mary. But I became pretty well acquainted with Father Yonov, Father Alexei Yonov, and was impressed by him because he was, at that time, a fairly young person, energetic, and so on. And I remember serving as an altar boy the Paschal services with him. But in the end, Father Kukulevsky refused to retire, and Father Yonov returned to Long Island, New York, and continued as priest at Our Lady of Kazan Church in Seacliff until 1971. Now, fast backward, as it were, and partly forward, when Father Kukulevsky did finally retire, the priest appointed to Holy Virgin Mary was Father Dimitri Gizeri. And when Father Dimitri came with his family, with his matushka, Margarita Romanovna, with her mother, and with Father Dimitri's and Matushka's son, Serafim Gizeri, although the age difference between Sima, as he was known and called at that time, and still is called that by many friends, the age difference probably was 8 years or so between Sima and me, but I was an only child in my family, and Sima was an only child in his family, and so we became close friends, actually, even with the age difference. I think we both welcomed the possibility of actually having a close friend who lived next door. And that was a great blessing. Father Dimitri was also a displaced person with his family. They came to the US, I would imagine, around the same time as we did, but to New York, and then was transferred to Portland, Oregon, and then was transferred to Holy Virgin Mary. But after Father Kukulevsky, it was a different rhythm and atmosphere in church life and parish life, because Father Dimitri was very active and hardworking as a parish priest. He reached out to people and really built the parish membership up in a remarkable way. Interestingly, he was not an eloquent man. You couldn't say that he was eloquent or colorful or anything like that, but he was very hardworking, very kind, and as a result of his pastoral work, built up the parish, created activities, including summer camps, for example, and the parish, in my conviction to this day, owes Father Dimitri a great debt of gratitude, showing, as he did, that the key to pastoral work and the key to priestly ministry, in the end, is not eloquence. It is kindness and the ability to welcome people and to bring people together, sometimes very different people, but bring them together in a common labor and a common mission. In his work as the parish priest, he was aided very profoundly by Matushka, Margarita Romanovna, who did educational work in the parish school, Russian school, and Zakon Borzhey. Most of the Zakon Borzhey was taught by Father Dmitry, but Margarita Romanovna was very active as an educator in the parish. And then she was a key person in managing the summer camp program. So that is a vivid memory of what it means to build up the church without loud eloquence, but rather through hard work and kindness and receptivity to people, ability to welcome people. Only years later, not many years, but after my childhood and youth, I discovered that Father Dmitry was the cousin of the bishop in Russia, who at that time was a bishop, then became rapidly a metropolitan, and eventually was Patriarch of Moscow, Alexei II. Father Dmitry Gizeri's mother was the sister of Patriarch Alexei's father. So the relationship was very real and very deep. Now, years later, in the 90s, when I came to know Patriarch Alexei, I feel sure that his interest in meeting me whenever I requested a meeting, an audience, was in large part probably due to the knowledge he had that I was very close to his cousin in Los Angeles. And in fact, I told him on one occasion early in our relationship that his cousin was instrumental in leading me to consider becoming a student at St. Vladimir's Seminary. I have to say that conversation occurred with Patriarch Alexei, who was still a metropolitan, when I was careful not to say that Father Dmitry, Your Eminence, was your cousin, because in the Soviet time it was better to avoid such conversations. But when I was first introduced to Metropolitan Alexei, I simply introduced myself by saying I'm priest of the Orthodox Church in America. I now serve in Long Island, and that I was for a long time a parishioner at the church in Los Angeles, Holy Virgin Mary, where Father Dmitry Gizeri was the pastor. And I didn't say that that's your cousin. And that Father Dmitry was, after the death of my father, was really a second father figure for me. So probably the relationship that Patriarch Alexei had with me and allowed with me was in some large part connected to that relationship that I had with Father Dmitry Gizeri.
You know, let me cut you there because I want to pursue a train of thought, and with your permission, I'm going to switch to Russian briefly for at least one question, because I think it is important for everyone viewing this interview to understand the bilingual nature of our culture in church and how we grew up. Very briefly, then I will switch to Russian. Вопрос следующий, и как раз вот отношение к отцу Дмитрию и к патриарху, это, конечно, влияет тоже на вопрос и на ваш ответ. Что привело к вашему решению стать священником и пойти вот по духовному пути? Какие события, какие встречи, вот какие у вас воспоминания?
Отец Дмитрий довольно регулярно приглашал в Лос-Анджелес в собор отца Александра Шмемана, который читал лекции в приходе. Отец Дмитрий это очень поддерживал и находил возможности приглашать отца Александра. И однажды отец Дмитрий сорганизовал расписание мое и отца Александра так, что нас с отцом Александром усадили вместе в маленькой комнате тогдашнего настоятельского дома, чтобы поговорить. И я тогда абсолютно не был убежден, что я хочу быть священником или что я пойду по этому пути. Я помню, отец Александр в каком-то смысле образно отмахнулся от этой темы, сказал, но это не мешает, учиться богословию. И для этого самый верный путь – быть студентом в семинарии. Так что он, отец Александр и отец Дмитрий, я полагаю, хотели, чтобы я шел по этому пути, но я тогда не был убежден в этом. Это пришло со временем. Я думаю, мое впечатление, ну и о старце Александре Кукулевском, и тем более впечатление от отца Дмитрия. Здесь можно упомянуть тему, как бы в церковной жизни необходимо было строить церковную жизнь и опыт к тому времени, в 50-е годы прошлого столетия, уже и на английском, не только на славянском или русском. И что было замечательно, отец Дмитрий, как, ну, можно сказать, удачный и целенаправленный настоятель собора Богородицкого в Лос-Анджелесе, почувствовал необходимость в английском языке. Сам он мог говорить на английском языке, но не говорил очень свободно. И он нашел и пригласил в помощники себе священника, который тогда был в Техасе, отца Илария Мэдисона, который, прибыв в Лос-Анджелес по плану отца Дмитрия, начал совершать богослужение на английском, было 2 литургии, и создавать некоторую общину англоязычных прихожан. И когда это начало находить, так сказать, свой путь в приходской жизни, и я, наверное, оценил как-то в каком-то подсознании, что отец Дмитрий, опять-таки, не очень свободно владея английским, чувствовал необходимость дать в приходе возможность молиться и служить и на английском языке. И вот сотрудничество отца Дмитрия с отцом Иларием Мэдисоном было сотрудничеством, ну, очень таким доброжелательным друг к другу. Они никак не мешали друг другу, а восполняли миссию друг друга. Отец Иларий скончался несколько лет тому назад в Свято-Тихоновском монастыре, где он последние годы своей жизни провел в братстве монашеском в Свято-Тихоновском монастыре. Одним словом, при отце Дмитрии на моих глазах развивалась картина приходской и церковной жизни и жизнеспособности и приходской и церковной жизни, что церковь православная не должна быть музеем, не должна быть сосредоточенной на теме сохранения какой-то этнической реальности или лингвистической реальности, но должна иметь способность обращаться к людям разных языков и разных жизненных опытов.
Which was, in fact, the mission 100 years ago of Patriarch Tikhon, to pursue
exactly.
that. Yeah. So let me pursue that a little bit. So part of this dynamic of the 50s and 60s were emerging from the war years. The trauma of the war years is slowly beginning to recede, and the Russian diaspora, the emigre community, is finding its roots in the new country. And with that, with the help of Father Dimitri, we are getting we're seeing church life getting a new dynamic, becoming very alive as a community. I would like to then pursue your memories of summer camp. You mentioned Margarita Gazzetti being very involved in that, but in general, your memories of how summer camps evolved, when did they really start, your participation in the summer camps, and how many people were involved in the summer camps?
You know, I don't have the statistics ready to mind. The number of campers was significant. It required a lot of organization. The camp needed camp counselors. It needed cooks. It needed teachers, and that was successfully done by the parish, by Father Dimitri, and by Matushka, Margarita Romanovna. I actually did not join in the camping when I would have been simply a camper. I joined in the camp program when I was already a student at St. Vladimir's Seminary. And so in the summer I would be back in Los Angeles and began participating as a camp counselor and became very acquainted with what was required in organizing the camp as a good experience. The camp had a Russian tonality to it, but it was not obsessively Russian. So surely the campers spoke, I would say, primarily, if not only English with each other, but some of the counselors and pedagogues in the camp program tried to maintain Russian, and that was good. But the fact that it was not obsessively and narrowly the goal, really the goal was to bring children and young people together in a church context. There was daily prayer, there were confessions, there were services in the camps. At that time the campgrounds were rented, and the campground was totally at our disposal. As I recall, the owners of the campground were actually Orthodox, the Antiochian Orthodox, but they did not run continuous programs in the summer, so Holy Virgin Mary was able to rent the facility.
Where was the camp physically? Where was it located?
It was in the mountains near Los Angeles.
San Bernardino Mountains?
Trying to recall. The location was called Big Pines. I remember that.
Yeah. Yeah, a well-known recreational area. So let me pursue a little bit further the parish life besides just the summer camp. So in terms of some of the personalities involved in some of the big events, and by events I mean big weddings, big funerals, and what I mean by big is not quantity-wise, but in terms of historically kind of known individuals, and to what extent there was both children and representatives of the first and second wave of the immigration. To what extent did they come together? Are there such events that come to mind that were historically significant at Holy Virgin Mary?
Well, I do remember that the visits to the parish of Archbishop John Trzaskowski were significant events. My father, as the son of a priest himself, was well acquainted with the subdiaconal roles at bishop services, so he was all the time, or most of the time, one of the two subdeacons assisting Archbishop John. And recently some photos of those events that included my father and sometimes me as well as an altar server have appeared. In my memory, at least, the funeral of Father Kukulevsky is a significant event. At least in my memory, was it a significant event in the parish? I guess it had to be, certainly. A priest who had served for a number of years was buried from Holy Virgin Mary Cathedral. Metropolitan Leonti's presence was significant, and altar service when they served with Metropolitan Leonti. Metropolitan Leonti always remembered that he and I were Kishkovsky, that we had the saint's name that he had most of his adult life before he became a monk was Leonid, and he knew I was Leonid, so he would dwell on that for a minute or so, and he always gave silver dollars as gifts to the altar servers. I think somewhere in a box I still have those silver dollars. I never spent them. The enlargement of the church building was a major event. The church was very, very small. It was beautiful, but it was very, very small. And under Father Ghisetti's pastorship, the attendance grew, and the need became obvious that more room was needed, so the church was enlarged. And also the parish hall was enlarged significantly because there was need for space for the Russian school, so-called, and for activities in the parish. Not all efforts were successful. Father Dimitri worked hard with the help of some people in the parish who had fond memories of being members in their youth of the so-called R clubs, the Russian clubs on the East Coast. And a serious effort was launched to establish an R club in Holy Virgin Mary Parish. I don't know the eventual history or fate of the R clubs. I haven't kept track of it in Los Angeles, but I remember the effort I was involved in just didn't work. Mm-hmm. There were a number of young people brought together. I remember one outing we had for horseback riding in Griffith Park. I was not particularly enamored of horseback riding, and humorously, the R Club guidance that we were receiving had a lot of emphasis on writing bylaws. So we spent endless hours writing absolutely senseless bylaws.
Well, that begs the question, besides that, were there other affiliated Russian organizations like Veterаны, Kadetskie Korpusa, that sort of thing, that were somehow affiliated with the church, or tangential at least to the parish life of the church? Do you remember such organizations?
Well, there were the ballet of various organizations which were encouraged and supported by the parish or parish membership. Rather soon after the Ghizetti family moved to Los Angeles, a phone call came in, and the call was picked up by Matushka's mother, Ekaterina Apollonovna, and she rummaged in her memory and said, well, there's going to be an invalidny bal in 6 weeks' time. And the retort over the phone line was, "Да, но мы хотим танцевать, при чем тут инвалиды?"
And so legends are born. In terms of key people, benefactors to the church, besides Matushka and Father Dimitri, in those years, are there other people who particularly stand out as benefactors for the reconstruction of the church, for helping to organize and coordinate work with the summer camps, and just activities around parish life? Were there particular names?
Again, back to Father Dimitri's character, he was phenomenally successful in obtaining bequests and wills for the parish from parishioners, both wealthy and not so wealthy. It's a remarkable skill. He did not turn people off, but he clearly led conversations at significant moments in the direction that brought parishioners to the point of leaving in their wills, leaving funds to the parish. There was at least one large donation which resulted in the foundation being, after the death of the donor, being established to distribute the funds. And for a time, as a student at St. Vladimir Seminary, I benefited from that in terms of scholarship money. But that kind of growth and build-up of the parish, again, was done by Father Dimitri without the gift of eloquence, but with the gift of pastoral care for people. So it was not, in a bad sense at all, aggressive. It was, in a very good sense, the result of a relationship with people, as they as parishioners and he as the parish priest.
So let me change tack here a little bit, and we're going to engage the Wayback Machine and go back to your personal history, your parents, and where you were born. Now, you were born in Poland.
Yeah, I was born in Warsaw in 1943. Well, right in, I think my birth date overlapped, that period of time overlapped with the Warsaw Ghetto uprising. And my parents fled from Warsaw before the Polish Warsaw uprising, along with many, many people fleeing to the West. People who did not want to stay in lands or countries or territories occupied by the Red Army. So fleeing, there was a large family group. I don't know if they traveled all the time together, but there was my grandfather, a priest of the Orthodox Church of Poland, and his matuszka, and several children. My father was either the oldest or the second oldest in the family. So there was my mother, my father, and trains were boarded and people fled to as far west as possible. And my family, and I don't really know the reasons that led to that, other than fleeing as far west as possible. We ended up in the far southwest of Germany, in a little, very colorful, very picturesque city called Lindau in Bodensee. And I have some childhood memories of that place. My father was able to find his way through a number of languages, Polish, Russian, Ukrainian, German, French. And so, because of his abilities in language as an interpreter, and generally knowing languages, our immediate family did not end up in any kind of camp situation. The larger family did live in DP camps. And we did not. We lived independently within German society, which I'm sure at times was not welcoming us. I think they used to call us damned refugees or something of that sort. At some point, and I don't know exactly when, before we immigrated from Bremerhaven to the United States, but before that, my father, because of job location, I think, and the family ended up in the Black Forest, and lived in the Black Forest for a time. Very small town. It's worthy of note that we did not live in obviously not in the Soviet zone, nor did we live in the American or British zone of occupation. We lived in the French zone of occupation, because at the very end of the war, in order to give some respect and honor to de Gaulle and to the French, a portion of the occupied territory of Germany was carved out to be a French zone of occupation, and that part of Germany was, of course, close to the German border, to the French border. So we did not have an absolutely typical experience if you consider refugee camps as being typical. It's interesting, and what I'm going to say is simply a fact, but it's an interesting fact. What to make of it, I'm not totally sure. But the part of the larger family that did have the refugee camp experience, upon arrival in the U.S., became part and parcel of the Zarubezhная Церковь. Whereas my father and mother, living essentially next door to Holy Virgin Mary Cathedral, which was in the Metropolia, didn't bother their head with making a jurisdictional choice. They could have traveled across town, as did my grandmother and my uncle and my aunt, but we simply went next door to church, which seemed natural and practical, and we were welcomed there. So it's interesting that at least in some cases the refugee camp, DP camp experience leads to a more closed perception of one's place in any given culture, and the absence of that experience opens doors to something bigger.
No, a very interesting observation. I hadn't actually run into that. I think that's quite fascinating. What year did you physically arrive in the United States?
1951.
51.
And I was, my 8th birthday was on board the ship on the Atlantic.
Okay. And the first, I think you said 10 years you lived in immediate proximity to
And then when we moved, when the parish needed that space and that house in a different way, probably to demolish it actually, we moved, my mother and I, but then my mother was widowed, we moved to an apartment 4 blocks away. So we could still walk to church, in fact.
And you stayed in high school, sort of now the American experience. Where did you actually go to high school?
Well, I went to grammar school. The church, the cathedral, is on Michael Turina Street, and my grammar school, elementary school, was on Michael Turina Street, but I don't know, 2-3 miles away. Right off Sunset Boulevard, and I remember trekking up the hill and down the hill to get to school. My memory is interesting also that my teacher in the 3rd grade took time with me and one other pupil who had the refugee DP experience as well in her family, took time to spend time with us and helping us learn English. And also I remember taking us to our first American movie. It was pretty sure it was Snow White and 7 Dwarfs or something. That was fun. But some things find their place in memory later. I remember some classmates who were Japanese, and it only occurred to me years later that they likely were born in internment camps when the Japanese in the United States were sent to internment camps. So my classmates, certainly they didn't talk about it, but they would have to be pupils born exactly around the time I was born, and they would have been in internment camps. And only later, following the history, I came to realize that that was, well, a dreadful failure of American policy.
Right.
And the U.S. government has very belatedly, I think, issued apologies and some restitution, I think. The irony or tragedy actually was that the young men, Japanese American young men, while their families were in internment camps, were serving in the U.S. Armed Forces. Again, all of that made sense, or all of that became clear to me as making no real sense at all. Years after elementary school, I went to Virgil Junior High School, again walkable, under the freeway that was completed around the time Hollywood Freeway that was being completed at the time we lived there, and ultimately John Marshall High School, which required busing. A school bus came by daily to bring from some route along the way through Silver Lake area to around Los Feliz, to John Marshall. Again, things fall into place slowly in terms of American reality and history. It was only a week or two ago that I learned that the famous John Marshall, the extraordinary Supreme Court justice, was a major slave owner in his actual real life. So many pieces and fragments of things come together slowly.
Well, you had to deal with two histories and somewhat integrate the two of them. The history where you were born and the history that was left behind, but of which you carried with you, and the new history that was developing in America, the new realities of America. And that's a lifelong process.
But even family history became vivid, in some respects, very late in my life. My mother died several years ago, and it was before she died that she shared with Mimi and me her recollection on two levels. One was it bothered her all her life that clearly my grandparents, her father and her mother, never had a funeral service. They stayed in Warsaw when we left and essentially disappeared, possibly dying under the rubble of Warsaw as it was bombed and attacked by the German forces during the uprising. Later, when my mother revisited Warsaw for the first time, as the communist system was collapsing, a friend shared with her the news or the fact or the information that her friend had that my grandfather was it seems shot during the Warsaw uprising. Now, part of the fragmentary memory seemed to be that it was Russian soldiers who shot my grandfather. But I'm a voracious reader, and in very recent years I have read big tomes of studies on wartime Poland and Warsaw, and pieced together that when the Germans were suppressing the Warsaw uprising of the Poles, allied to the German forces were Russian-speaking units. One of them, a very vicious one, it was not Roa, the Russian Liberation Army, that were by definition vicious, but there was a similar unit that came from Russia as a unit and was deployed by the Germans in suppressing the Warsaw Uprising. So it is possible that my grandfather was shot by Russians, but who were fighting on the German
For the German side.
Our first assumption was that maybe there's something off in the chronology, and maybe he might have been shot by the Soviets, but evidently not. Part of this family lore my mother shared with me before she died was that her mother and father were urging my mother and my father not to flee with me brought along, but rather to leave me with them, arguing, well, people didn't know whether it was worse to flee or worse to stay. My parents made the decision that in their estimation it was better to flee and not to stay. But had I been left, I might well have been, I would have ended, I'm sure, in a Polish, an orphanage of the Polish communist state. So those choices were pretty tough for everyone, I'm sure for my grandparents as well. My mother made a request that since there was no way that her parents could have had an Orthodox funeral service, to do her funeral service in a way that would be jointly also theirs. So we did do that when my mother was being sung off. Odpiewanie means singing somebody off, not in a negative sense, but accompanying somebody in song. So her funeral became concurrently the funeral of her father and her mother.
Right. Understood. So one other thing that we absolutely must touch on is, of course, Mimi, also known as Alexandra Fyodorovna, and how you met and a little bit about her background.
Well, we met at St. Vladimir's Seminary. I think that Teta Sonia Kulumzina, her husband Nikita was Mimi's father's brother, and Sofia Sergeyevna was a professor at St. Vladimir's Seminary in the field of education, teaching seminarians something about educational principles and etc., etc. And she gave encouragement to Mimi to come to a retreat for college students that was being held at St. Vladimir's Seminary, and that's when we met. I'm pretty sure that Sofia Sergeyevna had some cryptic intentions in making sure that happened. And I'm grateful to Teta Sonia. Interestingly, Sofia Sergeyevna has become, in some ways, a bestseller in Russia today, because the books that she wrote have become real sources for pedagogues, for teachers, for church schools in Russia. And she was an excellent teacher. Well, as things occur, one thing led to another. I still regret that the tree under which we met, which was a huge tree in front of the main building of St. Vladimir Seminary, because of the reconfiguration of the property.
We were speaking about how you met Mimi and the connection to St. Vladimir Seminary, and specifically about the disposition of the tree. So let's start with your specific memories about the tree.
There was a great, wonderful big tree in front of the main building, at that time the main building of St. Vladimir Seminary, and I for some reason remember that moment as being a meeting point for me with Mimi. We also interacted at the home of Father John Meindorf, who was a professor at the seminary and my professor, and he was also a close relative of Mimi. So as the months moved on, we were married in 1969. We were engaged in Los Angeles at Zuma Beach, as I recall, when Mimi had come from Canada by bus to visit with her sister Olga. And I had the intention of proposing marriage, but of course was chicken a good deal of the time we were spending together in Los Angeles, but devised a plan in my mind that we'd walk on the beach, and that when we reached a certain big stone on the beach, I needed to make sure the question was asked and the answer was given. Cutting to the chase, we were married in August 1969 at St. Serge's Chapel at Lac La Belle, which was a summer place frequented by quite a few people that Mimi's family knew and were related to. Among those people, Father Alexander Schmemann and Father John Meindorf spent weeks of their summer vacations at Lac La Belle. So we were married there. I was ordained deacon in September 1969 at St. Vladimir Seminary Chapel. But interestingly, after that ordination, we visited the Seacliff Chapel, the Seacliff Church, where I'm now, for many long years, the rector, the priest, because there were some relatives of Mimi's here, but I also knew some of the parishioners already, and I had met in Los Angeles when he served there for a short time. I had met Father Alexei Yonov, who was then the priest here, and we had a lengthy conversation with him in the very kitchen in which we now spend a lot of time, because at that time he lived in this house, and we have been in this house now again from 1974 on. That we met, Mimi and I, at a St. Vladimir's location in the context of a conference for college students was a significant signal to the journey that we would take in the years ahead, especially in the San Francisco area, where we pursued, launched, successfully worked on OCF groups in several of the colleges and universities in the San Francisco Bay Area. So our marriage has been a lovely one. It has been a life of service to the church and service to people, to often connection with the church, and sometimes independently of that connection. If I may, I would like to go back to the 60s when we immigrated to, my family immigrated to Los Angeles. Now, it's not that I thought this through philosophically or intellectually, but clearly I had experienced an impact in the long term by the fact that our move to the United States as immigrants, as displaced persons, was facilitated and accomplished with the help of Orthodox people in the Orthodox Church in Los Angeles and the Lutheran World Relief Organization, which paid for the passage on the boat from Europe to America. And I remember my parents paying for that passage to the Lutherans when we became a little bit established in Los Angeles. The point I'm making here is that I was existentially aware that we had been brought to the United States through the cooperation of Orthodox Christians and of Christians who are Lutheran. And in looking back, that had an impact. And many things I have done in my life in pastoral terms, in social welfare terms, in ecumenical terms, I think was under the influence of that existential remembrance that Christians, and in the long run, all people, ought to collaborate, and that collaboration is often, can be often very important for people who are in one way or another suffering difficulties and challenges. And that continued somewhat in the Holy Virgin Mary Parish when Father Dimitri Gazzetti, that must have been when I was in the university as a student, directed me, asked me to collaborate with a woman whose name I don't remember. She was in one or another Protestant denomination. It may be that she worked with Church Road Service, which is the national inter-Orthodox and inter-Christian organization helping people in need, particularly refugees. And the point was to assist this woman in facilitating a family of Coptic Christians who had just been brought over from Egypt, where they had been certainly facing great difficulties and great challenges. I don't remember that family's name, but I remember spending time with them in the apartment that was found for them, and attempting to guide and advise them as they made their way in America. Since that time, the communities of Coptic Christians in the U.S. have become big and very active, and most parts, most metropolitan areas have lovely Coptic churches now. At the time that I'm speaking of in Holy Virgin Mary, this was just the beginning of the arrival of Christians, in effect fleeing from Egypt. So all of this, more as a remembrance and as an existential reality, I'm sure helped me, encouraged me to be involved in similar activities, in similar organizations, churches, that come together in order to give important help to people who are suffering as refugees or suffering as victims of war and violence in Africa or Europe or Asia. So these are life-forming experiences that take some years of your life to bring to fruition as an adult person in trying by all means to do the right thing in life and society, in the church.
One correction I would like to make for the record: you mentioned you immigrated in the 60s, but I believe you meant in the 50s to Los Angeles.
Sorry, yes, of course, it was 51.
Yeah. So to use this opportunity to segue to the last question, the word collaboration is very big with starting with OCF. We also spoke about Sofia Sergeyevna Kulomzina. So I would like to finish this interview with some of your reminiscences and thoughts going forward with what we consider to be a very important project of the Orthodox community in the United States, and that is the Religious Books for Russia, RBR as it is known. You began your association with that still at Holy Virgin Mary.
No, I think it began here.
It did begin here?
And in fact, RBR started from Long Island and from Kazan Church.
Yeah, could you speak to the history of it a little bit?
It was our parishioner by the name of
Ekaterina Lvova, right?
Ekaterina Lvova, right, who was a parishioner here, lived nearby, up the hill. She was a very energetic and forceful woman, elderly, and essentially started on her own and gathered people to collaborate in this. After she visited the Soviet Union, and she was with relatives who lived in the Soviet Union, but came back from that trip with the burning desire to overcome obstacles and to help at least some people in Russia, in the USSR, by providing some of the religious literature that they could not find in Russia, because the communist regime prevented the publication even of Bibles. At some points there were permissions given to publish the Bible, but it was very difficult to find prayer books, Zakon Božий books, theological books. And so RBR became an organization in the US which also involved people at Holy Virgin Mary in Los Angeles to little by little collect modest and humble amounts of money and use that money either to buy existing books in Russian, religious books, eventually even to publish some books that RBR considered important to provide believers with in the Soviet Union. So certainly I was only one of many. Many people began to carry these books as gifts to people in the Soviet Union. And I remember, perhaps most vividly, on one of my early trips to the Soviet Union, to the Russian Church, I had the intention to give a prayer book to someone who surely would be grateful to receive it. And I remember I went on my own at that point. It was not we were not at that moment a group. But I went to the service at Holy Trinity Cathedral at the Lavra of St. Sergius near Moscow. I was standing at the service and looked around to find the person to whom I wished to give the book, the prayer book. And the prayer book was published in France, in Russian script, but the traditional prayers in the way that people in Russia know them, in Slavonic. And I found nearby a man who was very intensely praying. And before leaving the church, I tapped him on his shoulder and gave him the prayer book. And I said, "This is a gift. Please pray for me." Well, the response of this person was stunning, because he was crying. He said that he had come on pilgrimage to the St. Sergius Trinity Monastery from a far, far away place in the Soviet Union, and he even said, "Is this really for me? Is it?" And so I absolutely insisted it was really for him, and then said my goodbyes. So that very simple, modest encounter certainly gave me the impetus to try to continue to help the founder of Religious Books for Russia in her very worthwhile and holy labors.
That is such a profound story, in that we often hear in the comforts of our lives in the West forget about the hardships. We don't really have a direct experience a connection to those hardships that the people lived through and continue in many cases to live through in the Soviet Union and Russia and all that, and the power of the Religious Books for Russia program.
I have one other vignette. Much later in the 90s, in my ecumenical work, actually, probably at that moment I represented the National Council of Churches in the US. I was in Riga, Latvia, and spoke with an archbishop by the name of Vanax. His last name is Vanax, who was a relatively new archbishop of the Lutheran Church in Latvia. And we were having an interesting, good conversation. I won't conceal that we were enjoying good beer when we were talking. And since I had some sense of what people went through in the Soviet Union, and we were talking after the changes had begun, so I said to the Archbishop, I know that you came to the Christian faith as a young man. I know that required perseverance and courage. And I know that books were very difficult to find. Can you tell me what book or books, what authors had the most profound impact to you on the pilgrimage to Christianity, to Christ? He said, Father Alexander Schmemann. It seems that the books we were carrying to the Soviet Union in some cases went far and wide, and here was a young man then looking for literature. He found the writings of Father Schmemann, an Orthodox theologian, who happened to be my teacher at St. Vladimir Seminary. He found that most impactful. Again, collaboration. In this case, even unknown and unconscious, but collaboration between and among Christians in the form of RBR and books we carried to Russia and the Soviet Union had an incredible impact, even often outside the Orthodox circle. So that was an encouragement for sure. Many people like Father Schmemann, Father Meindorf, and others, and Sofis Kulamzin, who later became president of RBR, many people in the Orthodox community, some of them from other jurisdictions, Antiochian, Greek, at least by making contributions, were instrumental in allowing and encouraging this very modest project that never had millions of dollars in any bank account, but to do very significant good by providing religious books to at least some people in the very large population of the Soviet Union.
Father Leonid, thank you. As a way of closing this out, I would like to ask you perhaps to convey your greetings and blessings to the parish of Holy Virgin Mary on this rather epic anniversary that they're coming from, because your roots are so deep within that community. So if you would like to just close with maybe a few words about the anniversary.
Well, Holy Virgin Mary, in my recollection, in my memory, carries a special weight and meaning for me, because as a child, as a young man, as a college student, later as a seminarian, Holy Virgin Mary was really my home base. That was very important for me. I was ordained to the priesthood at Holy Virgin Mary, and it was Mimi and I went from there to San Francisco to our first parish assignment. So somehow Holy Virgin Mary, Father Dimitri Ghizetti, Father Hilary Madison, Matushka, Margarita Romanovna Ghizetti, all these people had a tremendous influence and launched Mimi and me towards whatever mission was going to be required of us as we moved on in life. So yes, I ask for prayers at Holy Virgin Mary, and send warmest greetings to Father Nazari, who has become a good friend, and to the whole parish on the celebration of the 100th year of Holy Virgin Mary.
Thank you very much, Father Leonid.